But I'd like to jump in with today's webinar now, with the objective that you experience some of these strategies that work so that you can apply them in your own teaching of academic vocabulary. In order to experience these strategies, it's best if you learn some new words yourself. So let's start with that. You'll be rating yourself as either a 1, where you have no knowledge of the word, 2, you've heard it and have a general sense of the word, or 3, you know the word and you can use it in context. Now, I'm hoping you don't know these words. They are actually English words, but in order to teach and model these strategies, I'm hoping they are not in your active vocabulary. Let's take a moment now and rate yourself. I'll read the words because that might help. The first one is borborygmus, cullet, hallux, and defenestrate. Please rate yourself again now for borborygmus, cullet, hallux, and defenestrate. I'm hoping, as with most groups where I do this demonstration lesson, that you are all 1s for all 4 of these words. If that's the case, by the end of this webinar, in the next about 6 or 7 minutes, I hope to increase your knowledge of those words with a lot of different strategies, all the way to a 3, where you would feel comfortable using them in a variety of contexts. In order to start this then, we're going to jump into a demonstration. We'll pretend that yesterday you were with me in the classroom and we read a story. Now, that story was just a part, and these words were in the story. So that's how we're going to start. We all read the same story. If you weren't here, it's okay. We're going to just review a little bit. So now I'll start the demonstration. Okay, class, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here again today. We're going to jump into our story again, but a quick review. Do you remember when the little boy came home from school yesterday and he was so hungry when he got home from school in the story that his stomach was growling? He had borborygmus. That stomach was just growling and it said borborygmus. Take your hands and make that growly, roly motion with your hands. I'll get it so you can see me. Borborygmus. Now let's say that word kind of the way it sounds. Borborygmus. We'll try it one more time. Borborygmus. And he said, Mama, I'm so hungry. I have borborygmus. I need something to eat. Can you please get me a snack? Well, unfortunately, by the time he got home from school, Mom was busy and she said, honey, I have got to get out right away and get to the recycling center. We have so much glass that needs recycling. We've got lots of cullet, that glass that needs recycling. If you can help me get the cullet sorted from the not cullet, then I can get to the recycling center and get you a snack. So he jumped in to help, and he first looked and he picked this up and he said, cullet or not cullet? Right, that's cullet. And he put it in the cullet box. Then he picked up the next and he said, cullet or not cullet? You're right, that's not cullet. And he put it in the other box. He picked up the next piece in the recycling bin and he got this, cullet or not cullet? You're right, it's not cullet. In the other box it goes. And finally, he had one piece left. Cullet or not cullet? That's right. It's cullet too. So he dropped that into the cullet box. Now he had a big box of all the cullet for Mom. And he said, Mama, I still have more borborygmus and I'm really hungry, but I sorted all your cullet, your glass for recycling. Can we go now? So she picked up that big box of cullet, and it was heavy. And you remember what happened in the story? I'm sure you remember, because the mother was walking out to the car with all her cullet, and she, ow, stubbed her toe. She stubbed her toe right on the corner of the table, and that hurt because she stubbed her hallux. Ow, she stubbed her hallux. Now, in this picture, the mother's hallux is in the sand. If you look at her hallux, does the left hallux have paint on it? Yes, it does. Does the right hallux have paint? It does, but it's covered with sand. Does her hallux have a ring on it? Nope, her second toe has a ring on it. The hallux is only the big toe. Let's take a minute now and draw a hallux. If you've got a piece of paper there, go ahead and draw a big hallux. Just one is fine, and you can draw the other toes next to it, but the hallux is this one right here. So it's a little bit hard to see. I'll do it in darker for you to be able to see. So go ahead and draw your hallux too. And while we're at it, as long as you're drawing, why don't you go back and draw what I might find if I looked in your cullet box? What kind of cullet would you have in your box of cullet? Okay, maybe it's a wine bottle, or maybe it's a different kind of bottle, or it's a jar, like a jelly jar. Draw a picture of your cullet as well. And as long as you're drawing, think about something that if you smell it, it gives you borborygmus. Borborygmus. You smell that smell like a hamburger grilling. Anytime I smell that hamburger, I get a little bit of borborygmus. My stomach starts growling when I smell that hamburger. Well, that's the same as that little boy in the story. And you remember, he had borborygmus, very, very hungry. He'd already sorted all that cullet in the box, but oh no, Mom stubbed her hallux on the corner of the table. Ow! She stubbed her left hallux, and now it's hurting. And Mom is so frustrated, and the little boy is frustrated because he's got borborygmus. Mom just wants to pick up that box of cullet and throw it right through the window. She wants to defenestrate it. Now, I know you've got something that makes you frustrated too. Something that just, if you could just throw it out the window, it would make you feel better. We're going to think of that thing, not a person, just a thing. Grab that thing in your hands. Got it? Now we're going to go to the window. And I don't have a window you can see, but it's behind this chart paper. Grab it in your hands, and we're going to put it right through the window. We're going to defenestrate it. Ready? Go. We defenestrated your object out the window. Now, if you know Latin or French, you might know how this word works, defenestrate. If you look at it, the D means out of. And that's in the pink color. Defenestrated, out the window it. And the fenestre from Latin or French, fenestre is window. So we're going to de-window it. And you can do that too. Defenestrate it, out the window it. Now, in today's part of the story, we're going to find out what happened to that poor little boy with borborygmus who sorted all of the cullet until Mom dropped it in the box, stubbed her hallux, and wanted to defenestrate that box of cullet and create more cullet. So today, we're going to find out what happens next. All right. That's the end of the demonstration lesson. In those about 8 minutes, you learned 4 words. And I used a lot of strategies to teach those different words. One strategy that I didn't have you do, because this is a webinar, is to turn to your partner and tell them when you might have borborygmus. So if you would think of that, I have borborygmus when, go ahead and create a sentence. And if you were going to turn to a partner and say it, you might say, I have borborygmus when I smell a hamburger. That was mine. I could also have you turn to your partner and show them your hallux. And your partner might say, nice hallux. Or they could comment on what you have in your cullet. Like you could describe, in my cullet, I have. So I would provide those sentence frames for you to partner share. But in the webinar setting, I didn't do that. So that's another added piece. So thinking about the things you experienced in those about 6 or 7 minutes, what strategies did you notice me using? Take a quick moment and jot those strategies down on a scrap paper or whatever you have in front of you. What strategies did you notice me using to teach those different vocabulary words? feel free to pause if you'd like to take longer to jot those words down. Because now I'm going to reveal some that I want to make sure that you were conscious of as you watch the demonstration, because these are the ones I'd like to make sure you apply to your own classroom setting. Those strategies that work, and these come from the research from Isabel Beck and James Nagy and Scott in their work, and Marzano's strategies, a lot of researchers that have shown all of these strategies together, put together, really help students put vocabulary from short-term memory into long-term memory, to learn how to use them in a variety of contexts and remember those words for more than just a vocab list. So take those lists and add a lot of these strategies, and some of those are the following. I provided a story context for the words. Now, you're not always going to have a story. It could be content, like the water cycle or the history of the Civil War. Whatever that story or context is, that's the experience that the students need in order to hang the new words on. Now, this may sound radical, but we're actually not pre-teaching the words. So if this were a real story, it's not. I just made it up to join these random English words so that you'd have a chance to learn in this context of the story. But if this were a real story, I would have read it to the class the first day as an out loud, or we'd read it together, and I would simply gloss the word borborygmus when it came up. And I'd say, oh, that's just the grumbling of the stomach. Now, they're not going to learn the word from that, but they'll be able to follow the story. So the first exposure is just in the context. Day 2 is when I do all the word work and the repetition and the practice and the gesture and the sound, the onomatopoeia, and all of the play with the word after they have the story context. So pre-teaching is actually maybe not as effective for a lot of the words as after teaching, once they have the context, once they know about the physics of acceleration or the biology of plant cell division. Now they have the context, and I can add all those words, whether it's cell division and we learn about chlorophyll after we have a context. We're building it within the context rather than a front load of random words that don't have any connection to the student at the beginning. So the story or the context or the experience first, add the vocab, hang it on with that experience, with that story, rather than a random front load without the context. The next big strategy that I used is multiple exposures in many different contexts. So because of the story context, I could add the repetition through questioning. Is it colored? Is it not colored? I could add it through, is the big toe, or is the hallux painted or not painted? Does the hallux have sand on it or not? Does the hallux have a ring on it or not? I can add all those questionings so you get a better understanding of the vocabulary. But first I need the context, and then the multiple exposures become very easy to use. So repetition is huge. From the research, we know that context or new content needs about 8 to 12 repetitions for students. So like the concept of the water cycle or the concept of photosynthesis, that needs about 8 to 12 repetitions for the average learner. But the vocabulary, the specific vocabulary like chlorophyll, would need many more exposures for the students to actually be able to say it in the proper context or write it in a report without using a word bank to actually own that word. Lots more repetitions. Also in this demonstration, I used a variety of visuals. You may have noticed that I used realia. You may have noticed the color photograph on the slide. I had a cartoon. It was actually one of my sketches. I did some drawings and had you do some drawings. So a variety of visuals, not just one or always a color photo from Google Images, but a variety. Visuals are also the hand gestures and the acting out. Which leads me to this, is that gestures and acting out are huge. Not all words are best learned with a gesture. So you have to kind of play with it and have the kids. But if you can add a gesture to a word, it will stay longer in their memory. For example, one 5th grade teacher teaching about plants had the students use that gesture for sprout. and no one forgot it in the class. They always went back to sprout. The gesture worked with the word. So I'd highly encourage you to do that as well. The cognate of defenestrate and connecting to native language whenever possible. So I know a lot of teachers of multilingual learners have their word walls posted with all of the languages from the classroom, the word that is equivalent. Now, the students can do that work for you. They can Google it if they don't know the word. They can ask their parents. That's a wonderful homework assignment. How do we say this in our language? And then along with this, the actual word on the word wall, the teachers are putting 3, 4, 5, or 15, if you have that many different languages in your classroom, languages around the English word. The kids themselves then can look at those words and determine, is it a cognate? Is it not a cognate? Look, this word looks the same in all these different languages. They learn a lot about how language works. They get excited about cognates, and cognates are easier learned vocabulary words. So highly encourage you to highlight those cognates in the native language and the connections. I also taught the prefix D, but in the context of the new word. I didn't randomly teach D because we're on the letter D of all the prefixes and we've already learned all the A and B and C prefixes. No, I taught D in the context of defenestrate so that you would have it out the window and have a connection. So prefixes and cognates are also very, very important. And then I ask a lot of questions using the vocabulary. So as you noticed, I didn't have you necessarily respond with the word, but I asked questions that included that vocabulary word. So that's another great strategy for getting repetition into building those words, having the students ask questions and having you ask questions using those words. These are some of the key strategies, although there were plenty of others. The partner work would have been really important to add in there, and having a sentence stem with that partner work is another key strategy. When I do this full demonstration as part of a full day academic vocabulary workshop, many of the groups that I work with can find up to 25 different strategies in about a 7-minute time period. Now, the reason I was going quickly and having you working through the words quickly is because I wanted to spend about the same amount of time on those 4 words as the students would spend if they had to look them up in a dictionary and write a sentence, which is a very common practice and not terrible. It's just not as effective. So if I only have 8 minutes at the end of the class to teach 4 words, rather than having the students look them up and write a sentence with them, I might try many of these strategies or others in addition or instead of those 8 minutes of looking them up in the dictionary. So if I'm doing dictionary work, it's for a different purpose. It's to help students understand how to do dictionary work, and I'm not opposed to it. And I did use dictionary definitions with Halleck's and Cullett. So you saw the actual dictionary definition on the slide. But in addition to that, there were a lot of other kinds of strategies built in. Dictionary alone will not give the necessary background, context, and repetition for the students to really acquire that vocabulary. So this demonstration with over 25 different strategies is used in a quick time frame to show teachers they can do other things with the same amount of time as having students just look up the words. And that's what I wanted to model and encourage you to use these strategies in your own classroom as well. So quickly rating your knowledge, I took a few minutes after the demo to talk about other things and to brainstorm what we did so that you would have a chance to forget those words. But if you saw the word borborygmus again, would you know what it means or at least have a gesture for it? Right, it's that grumbly stomach. It's the sound your stomach makes, borborygmus. If you saw the word cullet or heard it in a story, would you know what that is? If you said it's glass for recycling or had a picture of glass in a recycling box, that's it. If you saw hallux and you thought of the mother stubbing her toe or the picture of the hallux in the sand, you know what hallux is. And finally, if you saw defenestrate or read that, would you know that it means to out the window it, to throw something out the window? If you went from a level 1 to a level 3 in about 6 minutes of exposure, 6 to 7 minutes of exposure to those words, then wonderful for you. And I hope that that goes into actually a longer term memory for you, even though we had such very short exposure. And clearly in my classroom, that's not the only exposure the kids are going to get. We'll be working with those words and now playing games with them and putting them into other contexts and having the students write their own stories with them. This demonstration of 4 new words was really just for you as adults so that I could stay in English to teach you some of these strategies and experience them for yourself. Please stay in touch and thanks so much for your time. Have a wonderful rest of the day and good luck. Thank you for all you're doing for working with our English language learners.